Just want to thank you for joining me for the second video in my differentiated instruction series. In the first episode, I just gave a brief overview of differentiated instruction, specifically by using a learning path. So if you didn't catch the first episode, I encourage you to go back and watch it so that you have the background knowledge to understand this episode. And now we're going to talk about creating a stop on the learning path. And this just means we're going to focus on one small part of the learning that will take place during the scope of the school year. So I do have a couple of documents that you can download and use as a reference as we go through the steps. And then you can use them yourself with your own planning. There's also a student tracker that you can download and edit. I call our student trackers punch lists because I want my students just to knock out their work. So throughout this episode, we'll be referring to both of these documents often, so it may be helpful to have them printed out as we get started. So if you have a printed copy of the planning document, we're just going to start at the top and go over each one. So the first thing you'll see is the objective. So as you're planning a stop on the learning path, everything must strongly align to the objective. So deciding on your objective is the most important part of the whole process. It just helps you create a narrowed focus that you can use as a gauge for deciding what learning experiences that you'll plan. So to choose your objective, you have to think about the following 4 questions. First, is this an essential standard? So by essential, what I mean is that the skill is very important to the students in their near future and the distant future. So if this is a skill that you use often in your life, then it is essential. If it's something that maybe is a building block to an important skill that they'll be learning next school year, then it is essential. Being able to decide how important a skill is will help you know how much time and effort you should dedicate to the skill. So next, ask yourself if there are any other standards that can naturally be embedded into this one. So for example, Texas 4th grade students have one standard that focuses on knowing place value relationships. For example, each place is 10 times greater as you move to the left and 10 times smaller as you move to the right. And then they have this other standard where students have to multiply by 10 and 100. So these two skills are so related that it works well to teach them together. So look for standards that can be taught alongside each other. This helps create deeper understanding for the students, and it just saves time in the classroom. So another thing to think about is whether the standard builds on other standards. Thinking about this helps create a logical flow from one activity that you plan to another. And finally, are you focusing on language standards? If your school is, decide which ones: vocabulary, social interactions. If you don't intentionally think about these, you won't make them a part of the learning path. So once you have decided on your objective, it's time to really think about what all is included with the objective. Some standards are really narrow, but others are super broad. So make a list of all the specific skills that are included in your objective. So for example, one of the first standards that we teach in Texas 4th grade is the place value TEKS 4.2b. But when you really think about it, there's a lot of different skills embedded into it. So for example, students need to know the names of the places in the place value system. They need to be able to read large numbers. They need to be able to show a number's value in different forms, such as expanded form and expanded notation. Understanding 0 as a placeholder is important. They need to be able to move back and forth between number forms, and they need to be able to use this skill alongside the process standards. Plus, they have to add tenths and hundredths, which is a brand new skill for 4th graders. So looking at released tests is a great way to see all the different skills that can be embedded into one single standard. So when you're armed with this understanding, you can plan activities that make sure students are learning the standard deep enough to be able to apply that learning to a number of different situations. Once you have your objectives nailed down and you really understand what all your objective entails, then you need to decide how much time you're able to dedicate to this objective. So the first place you might want to start is just by looking at your district's scope and sequence. It's a great idea to start here because benchmarks are created and scheduled to coincide with the scope and sequence. And plus, they're usually created with collaborative input from teachers with experience teaching the particular grade level. So in other words, they have a pretty good idea of how quickly students can be expected to learn the material. If your school doesn't have a predefined scope and sequence, just ask yourself, how long will the average student need to learn the skill? But with differentiated instruction, remember the focus is on allowing students to learn a skill when they're ready to learn it. So you have to have some flexibility for your students. As you're planning your timeline, know that there's always going to be urgency in the classroom. Students are going to have to use every second wisely, and you're going to have to push students along the learning path. So don't plan your timeline with your slower kids in mind. Just know that you're going to have to be meeting with them every day to help close any gaps and to keep them on track. So now it's time to start thinking about what learning experiences the students are going to have in order to learn the objective. So hopefully your school works with a PLC model and you have other teachers on your team that you can collaborate with. Collaboration is great because you have multiple inputs for what lessons have worked or maybe haven't worked with students. So don't necessarily teach lessons that you've always taught. Think about your former activities through the lens of how successful they were. Were they helping your students learn? You could check out Pinterest and help find creative and effective ideas, or Teachers Pay Teachers. It also has lots of ideas. But as you're choosing your activities, just make sure that you're picking the activity because it strongly aligns to your objective. Never pick activities because they are cute or because they match a certain theme or they seem fun. The worst thing you could do is plan an activity that takes a long time to complete, but it doesn't have a good output of learning. Also think about how this skill is seen or used in real life. This is how I come up with most of my extension activities. And don't forget to teach new vocabulary and spiral in older skills. This type of practice ensures that students move the learning from their short-term memory into their long-term memory, and then they're able to better apply it to new situations. During the last episode, I talked about how the teacher needs to recreate herself through videos. So in order to have time to meet with the students that you need to meet with the most, the amount of time spent in whole group instruction has to be drastically decreased. Kids are always looking up hacks to games they play or spoilers to shows they're watching. In school, though, kids have become dependent on their teacher for learning. So they'll have to be reconditioned to know that they can learn it on their own. For student learning, I have found that teacher-created videos are the most effective. Creating your own videos is actually faster too. Before I began creating my own videos, I would be scrolling through YouTube for hours looking for just the right video. And it seemed next to impossible to find a video that taught the concept like I wanted to teach it. So recording your own videos using an extension like Screencastify and a digital whiteboard can literally just take 4 or 5 minutes. That's it. And then your students can watch it as many times as they need to. And if you absolutely just don't want to record your own videos, then you can find ones that are already recorded. YouTube has tons of videos. And if you happen to teach 4th grade, you can check out my video library. Regardless of the video you use, it's really, really important that you can replicate yourself because this is the only way that you can find enough time to meet the needs of all your students. I know I said this in the first episode, but when students have to go somewhere, like a video or a website or even a book, to find what they're looking for, they're learning how to learn. And if you can only teach your students one 21st century skill, this would be the one. When students learn how to learn, it changes their outlook on everything. So lots of teachers use teaching videos to help kids learn new information, but you should also start thinking about using videos to give directions as well. For example, you may have a math station game that kids can play to practice a skill, but you may not want all of them playing at the same time or on the same day. So you know as well as I that if you give students a direction on a game and then you wait for a day or two before they can play it, they're going to want to hear the directions again because they're going to forget. But by recording the directions, you buy back your precious time that would have otherwise be spent explaining the same thing over and over again. So save your time by creating tutorial and directional videos, and make sure all of your videos are accessible to your students. This could be through Google Classroom or even a printed QR code that's hanging on a wall somewhere. And after a while, the culture in the classroom will begin to shift. You'll be asked less questions because students will know where to go to find their own answers. And they'll be expected to help themselves and then help their friends. And then you will be freed up to work with your students that need you the most. So finally, let's talk about assessment. So when will you test the students? Well, the short answer is that you'll assess them only after they've learned the standard. And I don't mean that you've taught the material and they completed an assignment maybe. What I mean is that they've actually learned the skills and concepts. So how will you know when your students have mastered the content? Well, earlier I showed you the student tracker that I called a punch list. This punch list includes all of the assignments that the students can do to learn the material, but also a list of behaviors that will help them to become better students, and then a section for tracking their data. So using student trackers creates a data-driven experience for your students. It helps them to know where they were, where they are, and where they are headed. And every single day, you should be looking at your students' trackers. You'll be able to see what assignments they completed for the day. You'll be able to recognize when students need support, and you'll have had quick conversations with them about their successes or their struggles. And once you've had these conferences with your students, you'll be able to know which students need to meet with you in a small group. You'll continue to work with those students as much as they need it in order to learn the material, and you'll know when your student is ready to take the test because you have walked alongside them every step of the learning path. You challenged them when they needed challenging, you helped them when there was some kind of disconnect, and you even collaborated with their parents to help them find all the support they need. So when both you and the student feel confident, then they take the test. What about the students who haven't shown mastery of the content and they're just not ready to be formally assessed? Well, as you're looking at the tracker each day, you're going to have a good idea already about where each student is in their learning. So you'll be seeing their progress and pushing them towards mastery. It's important that you meet with students as soon as they show a need for it. This can be as simple as helping a student correct a problem that they solved wrong on their worksheet, or it can be as complex as working with a student who's a year or more behind where they should be. For example, if you're working on division with a student who doesn't know multiplication, well, then you're going to have to close that gap by spending additional time with them. Peer tutoring can also be useful. It gives students the opportunity to collaborate, communicate, and learn to explain and defend their thinking. So planning your interventions ahead of time makes intervening so much less stressful. If you realize you have a student who isn't understanding the skill, but you already have an activity planned for just in case, it alleviates the pressure that you can feel in those situations. Having extra assignments and hands-on materials readily available, it just makes interventions much more fun and meaningful for both you and your students. So we all have students that need extra help, and we all have students that need challenge. So how do you differentiate instruction for your high achievers or your gifted students? Having planned extension activities help keep your students in the same general place along their learning path. I like to plan problem-based learning for the students. Last year, we did this food truck challenge. The students worked through problem-based learning and different modules of planning a food truck business. So, and we had lots of fun opportunities the whole way, including an actual food truck owner coming to the school and meeting with those students. But there's other things that you can do as well. You can implement cross-curricular learning. So if a student has things that they are particularly passionate about, maybe science, you can find ways to integrate science into the concepts that you're trying to teach. You can also allow the students to just simply move on to the next stop of their learning path. At any given time in my class, I had about 3 different stops being worked on simultaneously. So some students got too far ahead, and then that's when I would just pull out the problem-based learning or even just allow them to work on a research project of their choice. Finally, students can use their extra time from learning quickly to help other students that aren't learning as quickly. Having students in your class that are gifted provides the opportunity for you to become the most creative teacher you can be. For me, helping my struggling students is always the most rewarding part about teaching, but challenging my gifted students is the most fun part about teaching. So the last part of the planning sheet is just to remind you to include good teaching practices in your lessons. So if you're not checking many of these boxes, it might be a good idea to revisit your plans and change things up a bit. All students should get high quality instruction and learning opportunities every single day. So let's take a quick look at the learning path planning sheet and sort of complete one together. So here I have the objective. So I'm going to start by teaching the place value TEKS and place value relationships. And I have 7 days according to my scope and sequence, and some skills that are embedded in the standard. I know I need to teach billions, word form, some different things that I need to focus on. So I've thought about different activities, and these are some of the activities that I thought might be good for the students. And I have a little checkbox if it's attached. That way I have everything that maybe I need to make copies for, just so I know what I've already gathered and maybe what I need to gather. And I've already went through and chosen videos that are going to teach the different skills that the students need to learn. So I have all of that stuff planned out and listed right there. On the next page, I have thought about which assessments I'm going to use. So I have some quick checks, some exit tickets, and then an actual quiz. And I've planned my small group remediation so that I have these activities ready to go and ready to meet with students. I've also planned an extension activity for my fast finishers. So now I'm going to look at my activities and just make sure that they align with some of the best practices. So I know that the digital activities they're going to be collaborating on. The partner games are fun. They're going to be explaining while they write the writing prompt. During the Texas Lottery activity, they'll be dealing with real world situations. I used lots of math, spiraled math for the review of old skills. They'll be using technology and they'll also be writing. So I just want to make sure that most of those boxes are checked for every single stop on your learning path. And finally, just think about the vocabulary that's new to the students for the objective that you're teaching. All of this work that you've done makes implementing the differentiated instruction so much easier. So now let's take a closer look at the student tracker. Again, you can download it. It's editable, so you can change it with your students. So on the punch list, I included a quick description of all of the different activities that the students are going to complete in order to learn the objective. And there's always some fun activities, but some of them must be completed in a certain order. These ones have to be completed first because they create the foundation that the students need in order to complete the other activities. So you can see these ones aren't numbered, and that's because I just let the students work on which ones they want to work on. Notice that I did include a spiraled practice. I list the different expectations on the punch list just to remind the students that it is something that they have to do. I also like to track personal or behavioral accountability on the punch list as well, so that students can begin learning to reflect. And the data tracker on this can be used to track grades from different individual assignments, such as task cards or a quiz, and then the students can fill this out, keep this form with them as they work through the entire stop on the learning path. And this helps keep the student on track, and it gives the teacher something to look at while she's making quick stops and conferences around the class and trying to gain an understanding of where each student is at. So today you've heard exactly how you can plan a stop on the learning path, which is just a differentiated instructional strategy. So there was a lot of information and a lot to think about, but I'm sure it left you with many more questions that you may want answers to. So episode 3 is going to teach you practical ways of implementing a learning path in your classroom. So we are going to discuss setting up your classroom for differentiated learning. I'll be teaching you how students can move independently through the classroom to gather the materials they need when they need them, and where students should turn assignments into you to be checked. And we'll talk about how you can manage staying on top of each student's work and how the students will know what to do next. Differentiated instruction is all about routines and procedures. So once this is in place, the students can really just manage their learning all by themselves. So stay tuned to learn even more to help you make differentiated instruction in your classroom a reality. So thanks again for allowing me to share some of my experience with you, and I hope you come back to learn even more. Have a great rest of your day. Check out how this product can help you build student success without the stress. This product is built to help students become successful with each 4th grade Texas standard. It starts with the student checklist. It allows them to stay organized, track completed work, build a growth mindset, and reflect on their own personal goals. Materials to add to student math notebooks provide an ongoing resource that can be used all year. Hands-on activities can be used in centers or stations to provide students with the opportunity to collaborate and build mathematical understanding. Each kit also comes with a digital resource, so you can embed technology into your lessons. Worksheets are included for those students who may need a little extra practice. This could be used for RTI, homework, or even a teacher rotation. All of these resources for your students are designed for student success. But every part of this product is also designed with the teacher in mind. Each standard comes with a pre-assessment. The pre-test is designed to have various levels of rigor to help form flexible groups. Formative assessment can happen through quick and simple exit tickets, and a star-like summative assessment can help you see if your students have mastered the standard. Keeping track of student progress helps you know exactly where each of your students is in the learning process. All of this work has been done for you, so you can do what you really love to do, teach. Click the green star that says "Follow Me" so that you will be the first to see when the next unit comes available.